Have you ever been in the USA and stayed completely silent? Were you scared to say something wrong? I will tell you a story we all know. You are in a foreign country and want to speak. But in the key moment, no word comes out. Awkward scenes appear, and they feel scary. This story shows why this fear is silly, how we often block ourselves. It shows that you do not need perfect speech, and that mistakes are a normal part of learning. Once you dare to start talking, many things flow naturally. During the story, I explain new words in a simple way, so you will hear a nice story and learn fresh words. My goal is to remove your fear, and to prove that speaking is easier than you think. My name is Carlos. I am 23 years old. 1 month ago, I moved to the United States. Before that, I lived in a small town in Mexico. My dream was always to work and live here. Yet the first days were strangely quiet. I opened my mouth, but no sound came. I felt like a statue carved from stone. All noises around me were loud, but I stayed mute. On the first morning, I went to a bakery for bread. The clerk smiled kindly and said something quick. I understood nothing. My heart beat like crazy. I wanted to ask how much the bread costs, but my lips stayed closed. After a long pause, I simply pointed at the loaf. She gave it to me, nodded, and took the money. I left the shop, drenched in shame. Shame is a feeling when you are uneasy or embarrassed. For example, you think you did something wrong or others might laugh. Thus began my month of silence. Each day something similar happened. People spoke to me, waited, wondered. I never answered. Once a neighbor asked the way to the station. I froze, stared at the ground, and pointed somewhere. He frowned and walked away upset. Later I felt even smaller than before. I asked myself why my voice had vanished. At home, I secretly practiced simple sentences. I said aloud, "Good morning. 1 bread, please. Thanks." Good. Outside, empty fear ruled instead. I felt trapped in my own skin. The days passed, yet nothing changed. I visited a supermarket on a Saturday evening. My basket was full of pasta, tomatoes, and cheese. At the register, the cashier asked for a rewards card. I had none, but also said nothing. She repeated the question, a bit louder. A line formed behind me. I felt eyes burning into my back. Finally, I paid in silence and left the change behind. At home, I noticed the loss only later. Still, I did not return. I had no strength for more stares. In a bar, it became even more embarrassing. I sat alone and saw a friendly girl at the counter. A counter is a long table or bar. You find it in bars, cafes, or bakeries where you order and pay. She smiled back and waved me over. My heart jumped, yet my voice stayed dead. I lifted the glass as if to speak. Then I turned away, ashamed. She shrugged and talked with someone else. I drank my beer quickly and went home. Questions and self-blame whirled inside my head. Why did this fear block me so much? I had learned words, read books, watched videos. But the real moment felt different. Every expectation from others made me silent. The city around me still stayed friendly. I heard music in the subway, smelled coffee in the streets. Everything sounded like a song without lyrics to me. I wished for a conductor for my tongue. Each evening I wrote a diary in Spanish. I noted every awkward scene in detail. Maybe I hoped to gain control that way. But the paper did not answer, just like I outside. The silence became a thick coat on my shoulders. I wore it everywhere, even in sunshine. Sometimes I thought everyone could hear my silence. It rustled like paper in the quiet air. I longed for a simple hello. Yet the day that would change everything was still ahead. Very soon. Next Monday, my alarm rang at 7. I needed a new job, so I got up early. Online, I had seen a post for a kitchen helper. The ad was short and simple. Still, panic hit me while reading. An interview meant talking, and that I could not do. I still put on a clean shirt and took the subway. Outside the restaurant door, it smelled of fresh garlic. A cook was smoking a cigarette. He nodded kindly and said, "Hi, looking for work?" No word left my mouth. Instead, I silently showed the ad on my phone. He frowned. Then he waved the boss over. The boss was tall, had a white beard, and laughed loudly. He asked many questions. Name, experience, hours? I nodded unsure, raised thumbs, made clumsy gestures. A gesture is a body movement, for example, with hands or head. With gestures you can show or say something even without speech. After 2 minutes, he shook his head. "Sorry, that will not work," he said. Heat flooded my face. I turned and almost ran away. On the street, I felt my knees shaking. I bought a coffee for comfort. The barista asked which size I wanted. Again, I did not speak. I showed 2 fingers for a medium cup. She smiled tiredly, gave the cup, and took the money. In the afternoon, I needed a bus ticket. The machine was broken, so I had to ask the driver. When the door opened, the driver looked at me. "One ticket?" he asked. I stood there, frozen. Passengers behind me pushed forward. The driver sighed, pressed the short ride button, and held out his hand. I placed more coins than needed. He shrugged and gave me the ticket. On the bus, I stared outside and felt small like dust. Yet the world kept moving as if nothing happened. That evening, my apartment doorbell rang. A delivery man stood there. He held a big box, probably for my neighbor. "Can you sign?" he asked. I took the pen, but my hands shook. I scribbled a line that was hardly readable. He thanked me and left. Only later I noticed this task also happened without speech. I wondered if I would stay silent forever. I had friends in Mexico who sent voice messages daily. I listened, but answered only with pictures or short emojis. They were confused. One wrote, "Are you alive?" I wanted to type, "All good," but my finger stopped above the keyboard. I felt too ashamed. In the second week, I got mail from my landlord. A form for my apartment registration was still missing. For that, I had to visit City Hall. The thought made my heart race. Forms meant questions, windows, numbers, people, words. I placed the letter on the desk and covered it with a magazine. Maybe it would disappear by itself. Of course it did not. Days grew colder, my fridge emptier, and still I spoke not one English word. My inner pressure rose like air in a sealed balloon. Each hour it grew bigger, more painful. I knew it would burst someday. But when? I still had no way out. I woke up on a Wednesday with a heavy head. The night before, I had slept badly. Again and again, I saw my silent scenes in a dream. I decided to face the problem head on. Maybe a clear plan would help, I thought. At the kitchen table, I wrote down goals. First goal, say 1 sentence each day. Second goal, do not run away when people wait. Third goal, smile no matter what happens. The goals looked easy, but felt huge. I showered, put on a fresh jacket, and went out. The street was wet from rain. Puddles mirrored the gray sky. At the light stood an older lady with a dog. I wanted to say good morning. My chest tightened. No sound came out. The woman still smiled and walked on. I breathed deep and sighed softly. That did not count as an English sentence. So I decided to enter a cafe. There I had to order, I thought. A small test, nothing more. I opened the door. A bell rang. The room smelled of cinnamon and fresh coffee. Behind the counter stood a young barista. He smiled at me and said, "What can I get you?" My heart hammered like a drum. I opened my mouth, yet silence again. The seconds stretched like gum. Finally, I raised 2 fingers, pointed at a croissant, then at the espresso machine. The barista nodded patiently. He tapped the price into the register. I paid with my card and sat by the window. My plan had failed again. I bit into the warm croissant. The taste was good, but my mood stayed low. While I chewed, a small girl came in. She pulled her mom by the hand. The girl laughed loud, pointed at the cookies, and shouted, "Cookies!" Cookies are sweet-baked treats. Many people eat them at Christmas, especially kids. The voice was strong and free. I felt a stab in my heart. Why could a child speak and not me? I suddenly felt very tired. I took my last sip of coffee. Then I left the cafe and walked to the subway. In the tunnel, a street musician played violin. The sound was sad and beautiful at once. I stopped and listened for a moment. Only a few coins lay in his case. He nodded at me while he played. On impulse, I dropped $2 inside. He played louder, maybe to say thanks. I formed silent words on my lips. "Thank you," I wanted to say. No sound came, yet his smile stayed. I walked on, sad and determined at the same time. Today I had failed again, but the day was not over. I reached the platform and waited for the train. Next to me stood a student with a bright painted skateboard. He hummed a song and typed on his phone. Suddenly the board slipped from his hand. It rolled toward the tracks. The student cursed softly in English. I jumped forward by reflex and stopped the board. I grabbed it and handed it back to him. He grinned with thanks and said, "You're a hero, man." I wanted to answer, "All good." But again, only air came out. The student noticed my silence and patted my shoulder. Then he boarded the train and vanished. I stayed behind and still felt some pride. I had helped, all without words. Maybe, I thought, deeds count as much as sentences. I hoped so. October brought cold wind and shorter days. With each cloud, my chest felt heavier. I now avoided almost every public place. But of course, I still had to live, eat, breathe, pay. My calendar showed the 29th day in Americirca. I still had not said one single word. That morning I needed milk and vegetables. So I walked again to the corner supermarket. Inside it was crowded because of a sale day. Speakers blasted ads. Kids screamed between shelves. The noise hit me like rain on bare skin. I grabbed everything on my list quickly. In the produce aisle, a box of apples fell and rolled loudly. I flinched as if someone had fired a gun. The checkout line was long like a river. I stood in back and stared at the floor. Ahead, a man talked loudly on the phone about soccer. His words felt like foreign music to me. My heart pounded, yet I stayed silent as always. At last it was my turn. The cashier was the same woman from my first visit. She looked at me and smiled slightly. "Rewards card?" she asked again. I only nodded, though I had no card. She tapped something and told me the price. I held my debit card to the reader. Beep, done, everything again without words. Outside, I stuffed the bag into my backpack hastily. Suddenly, someone tapped me on the shoulder. I spun around, shocked to my toes. In front of me stood a young, cheerful face. The woman had curly hair and sparkling eyes. She held a small coin purse in her hand. "Excuse me, this belongs to you," she said. It was my forgotten change. My eyes flew wide open. The fright rushed through every cell. Without thinking, I shouted loudly, "Help!" The word echoed in the entrance like a thunderclap. The woman jerked back, then laughed in surprise. "No worry, I won't hurt you," she said warmly. Heat filled my face, but also relief. At last I had spoken an English word, not perfect, but clear and loud. The woman handed me the coins and introduced herself. "My name is Lena," she said. "You okay?" I took a deep breath. My voice trembled, yet it was there. Thanks," I managed to say. My sentence was short, but fireworks in my head. Lena smiled broadly and nodded. "Very good," she said. "You can do it." Her words felt like warm sunshine. The stone weight in my chest cracked open. I laughed. A rough, strange laugh. Lena laughed with me, not at me. The moment lasted seconds, but changed everything. Suddenly, I wanted to say more, much more. I felt words dancing in my head. The wall of fear got cracks. Lena pointed to a small cafe beside the entrance. "Do you have time for a coffee?" she asked kindly. I nodded, then risked a soft yes. The yes came out warm but clear. My balloon of pressure slowly released air. We walked to the cafe together, step by step. Each step felt lighter than the one before. I knew the turning point had come. A turning point is a moment when everything changes. After such a moment, life continues differently than before. The sky looked brighter than in the morning. For the first time, I felt hope. We sat at a round table near the window. Rain hit the glass like quiet applause. Lena took off her jacket and smiled openly at me. She asked my name, though she had heard it before. I said slowly, "Carlos," and felt the fear soften. My Spanish R still rolled, but it sounded like real speech. Lena nodded with joy and ordered 2 cappuccinos from the server. She spoke slowly and stressed every syllable. I listened closely and repeated some words softly. "Thanks, please. Milk? Sugar?" She laughed gently and corrected my accent without being strict. I practiced the short sounds like a singer before a show. After a few minutes, warmth filled my chest. The words now came faster, but still tripped often. I said, "I'm learning English," and waited for her judgment. A judgment is an opinion about a person or a situation. Many people fear the judgment of others, what they may think. "Very good," praised Lena. "Mistakes are fine. The main thing is talk." I laughed in relief and felt true joy. Our cappuccinos arrived, steaming and sweet. Lena raised her cup, toasted me, and said, "To courage." I repeated softly, "To courage," and we clinked cups. Foam stuck to my upper lip. We both laughed loud. Then I told, in rough English, about Mexico, my family, my favorite food. I searched for words, painted pictures with hands and face. Lena asked simple questions, helped me find missing terms. She wrote some on a napkin, drew tiny arrows and hearts. Soon the napkin held more words than coffee spots. I realized learning can also be playful. The fear was still there, but it breathed slower now. After an hour, I felt like I had run a marathon. Yet I was not tired. I was alive. Lena looked at her watch and suggested a walk. The sun peeked between clouds as we stepped outside. Outside, the air smelled of wet leaves and fresh bread. I tried new sentences, pointed at houses, trees, cars. "What is that called?" I asked again and again. Lena answered patiently, spelled, and let me repeat. Sometimes I made jokes without grammar, but she laughed anyway. Passers-by may have wondered about our happy word game. I did not care. I was talking at last. We reached a small square with a fountain. Water sprayed in rhythmic arcs, almost like whispers. Lena sat on the stone bench and patted the seat. I followed and breathed the cold air deeply. "Tell me about your first English word," she said. I grinned and repeated loudly the famous help. We both burst into hearty laughter. People turned, smiled, and moved on. Every reaction now felt kind, not scary. The world had hardly changed, but my view had. I thanked Lena for her patience and searched for fitting words. She raised one eyebrow and said, "A dinner invite is enough." I said, "Yes," at once, without thinking about grammar. We exchanged numbers. Letters danced with joy on the screen. Then we parted. Yet my head kept humming. On the way home, I spoke aloud to myself. Every tree, every light got a small description. At home, I stood before the mirror and repeated new lines. I no longer felt mute, only raw, almost free. The next morning I woke up early and felt a surprising calm. I remembered Lena's smile and my loud help. That single word had opened a heavy gate. Now I wanted to walk through, not retreat. I decided to revisit the old scenes, but as new Carlos. First stop was the bakery on the corner. The clerk knew me and smiled carefully. I breathed deep and said clearly, "Good morning, 1 country loaf, please." My voice shook, yet it sounded alive. The clerk nodded, sliced the bread, and told the price. I paid, thanked her, and wished a nice day. She answered with true warmth. My heart danced. Outside, the fresh bread smelled like victory. Next task was the bus driver who once met my silence. I got on, smiled wide, and said, "1 day pass, please." The driver looked surprised, then smiled back. He asked if I had lived here long. I spoke briefly about Mexico, a month of fear, and my turning point. He nodded with care, wished luck, and printed the ticket. I took a seat and felt part of the city. When the cookie girl entered, I waved kindly. She grinned and called a happy hello back. The scene looked small, but to me it was huge. In the evening, I met Lena again, this time in a small diner. I had cooked spaghetti and wanted to explain the recipe in English. Words stumbled, lines knotted, yet we laughed a lot. Lena helped, corrected gently, and praised brave tries. I felt no pressure now, only playful curiosity. After dinner, we strolled through the lit streets. A street singer performed, this time a lively song. Lena walked to the singer and pulled me along. She tossed coins in the hat and urged me to sing. I knew half the chorus, but I still sang loud. Passers-by stopped, clapped, and no one mocked me. Instead of stone, I felt light wood in my chest. We finished the song, bowed, and moved on. I remembered the bar where I once fled in silence. This time I entered, saw the same counter, ordered a beer with confidence. Beside me stood a woman with red hair and curious eyes. I said hello, gave my name, and asked her favorite drink. She answered with sparkle. We toasted and began a lively talk. I made mistakes, yet corrected myself while laughing. Mistakes now sounded like steps, not like cliffs. Later, walking home, I hummed the street song. The night air was cool, yet my inside burned with joy. Before the mirror, I said aloud, "I live here, I speak here." The words did not echo empty, they filled the room with trust. I sat at the desk and opened my diary. For the first time, I wrote not in Spanish but in English. The pen flew as if it had wings. I ended the entry with a simple line. Today was a good day. Then I closed the window and listened to the night city. Cars rushed, a siren wailed, somewhere someone laughed. All those sounds now felt like friends, not threats. I whispered good night in English and turned off the light. Tomorrow I will start my new life.